I heard you mention, did you say economies of scale? Was that the term that I heard you use?
Yeah.
Could you define that?
So loose definition, not, economist definition, but just in terms of, essentially when you have something that is efficient, when you produce multiple numbers of that, the cost of producing it starts to go down, right? So the more that I have of this one machined, modular thing, if I produce more of it, the cost of each individual unit begins to decrease over time. So as I scale it up, the cost of it becomes more and more economic the more I produce. And so the example that is, it's not a one-to-one example, but the one thing that comes to mind when I think of that is, the shape of a honeycomb, right? The shape of a honeycomb, the hexagon, is I want to say it's the most efficient form that mathematicians have identified, right? And there's been a lot of speculation on how bees actually create this form. Is it is it a form that they actually create, or is it a form that eventually forms over time as wax starts to melt in place and things begin to solidify? Do bees start with circles that they make their hives out of, and then they essentially form into hexagonal patterns over time? But the hexagon is a shape that you see in a lot of designs, not only because it's efficient, but because of its flexibility and its ability to kind of be able to fit into any particular location. So there's this idea that there's these things that we refer to as deep patterns in nature, and one of those deep patterns is things being modular, and being able to be packaged and repackaged. Like a cell in a lot of ways is a modular system, right? It replicates, but it's still essentially the same. So another example is, a lot of people are excited about the potential of additive manufacturing and 3D printing. That's something you can find in nature, right? Like there's paper wasps who essentially, actually there's a lot of different creatures who, additively create their dwellings and their homes. So I don't have a specific example of that translation into economies of scale. But the examples in nature are prevalent.
What do paper wasps do?
So paper wasps, they essentially, I want to say that they ingest something, and then they, with their saliva, when they're building their shelters, I'll say, it's very much like, if you've ever seen a 3D printer, take the filament and then just like layer by layer produce something. Paper wasp and a lot of organisms create their I guess I'd say hive the same way. They essentially do it like that, if I'm making sense at all.
Right.
The other example for me that I love around additive manufacturing in nature is actually spiders, right? Like spiders in their body, they actually have these 4 chambers that have 4 different kind of chemical combinations or components within them. And then they actually mix those 4 chambers together to create different types of webbing composites, depending on what the spider needs to use that web for. So some might be sticky, some might be thin and strong, but it's the same kind of process of taking these chambers and then mixing this chemical construction to create and produce something that will then be used to manufacture a web. So it's just, it's everywhere. Like we're not doing anything new.
Why aren't we seeing that in the Spider-Man movies? That's a underutilized Spider-Man. He's always just swinging from a thing, or maybe a shoot a thing and it clogs up a gun. That's about all he's not building a home. He could be making his own suit. He has someone else make his suit. He could weave his own suit out of, if you're a real Spider-Man, I feel like make your own suit out of your bodily thing. I mean, that's he's really not utilizing. Spider-Man could take a look at spiders and maybe learn a few things.
I'll cut him a little bit of slack on that, because I feel like, you know, the one thing with web is at some point, you know, it begins to break down. So the last thing you want is to be in your spider web suit, like swinging through the air, and that's the only thing you have on, and then it just starts to decompose as you're trying to, like, you know, attach to the Empire State Building, right? As you're swinging through New York, right? Yeah. You know, so I'll cut him some slack there. But
they're going to see more than your face.
Oh, yeah.
Your secret identity.
You know, that's the other part, right?
Yeah, let's not cut Spider-Man too much slack, but sure. I mean, I'll give it to him.
I'll meet you halfway on that one,
Oh, sure.